Hey Hodies, welcome to my channel. My name is hautemesstom and thank you so much for clicking on today's video. In today's video, we're going to be reviewing the new Spectral Sunlight Cream Bronzers from Phytosurgence, and I will also be doing like a bronzer swatch comparison party, swatching the shades next to each other. I have shades 1 through 4, so we can compare those shades, and then I have also bronzers and contours to compare them to. If you happen to be new to my channel, hello, welcome. I typically like to be very discerning about the makeup I bring in to not only review, but also keep in my makeup collection, and I use a lot of the same makeup over and over again. I am also afforded the opportunity, both with revenue from my channel and brands send me PR. I do reviews also occasionally on my channel, and this is one of those moments where I bought some things to review. So if that kind of content sounds good to you, I would love to have you subscribe. Make sure to like the video and share it for those that you might think will find this useful as information. And I'm also on patreon.com if you would like to support me and be able to allow me to do future reviews. You can do that, but there's no pressure to support me on Patreon. Liking, commenting, that's all very wonderful and really valid. But thank you to all of my current patrons. You made this video happen. And I also have merch if you're into that. That's located down below. Before we jump into the review aspect of things, and there should be chapters along the bottom for you, let's go over to do some finger swatches and overhead swatches. I think it'd be really beneficial and helpful to some people to see these swatched up against some of my other bronzers and contour. I did grab my contours as well. A lot of contours tend to just feel bronzery, so I just think it would make a lot of sense to compare them. I'm gonna go shade 1 through 4 down my wrist. So here we have Golden Daybreak, Rosy Daybreak, Golden Warmth, and Rosy Warmth. I've mentioned this before, but the brand says not to use your fingers with these, and I'm inclined to agree with them. But let me pull out some other things for us to compare these to. All right, so everything right here is technically considered to be a bronzer. That's how they are sold, so we'll swatch them up next to them. This might be an interesting one to see. This is the e.l.f. Putty Bronzer, and it is in the shade Feeling Shady. It kind of looks a little bit like Rosy Daybreak. I bought this for my contour video, but I find that it doesn't really like to show up. It just doesn't have very much pigment. Even if I build it, that's about as much as I get from it. It is almost, even if you are like really, really, really fair and desaturated, this might be a little bit better, but it is kind of close to it, but like they're not quite the same thing. This is the Fenty Cheeks Out in Amber. I'm holding on to this for my contour video because this is what I used it for, but it is technically a bronzer. I don't have very much product left. It's not really pink. I find that this has like a little more gray green than anything here. I would say it is like closest to Golden Daybreak, but I wouldn't say that they are like dupes for each other. This is a new acquirement, and I got this recently. Baby Got Bronze from Essence, and I'm gonna swatch it with my finger just to keep it consistent with the other swatches. I'm not sure if I would consider that really a bronzer. I bought it for my contour video because it is a bit gray purple. I'm going to build it up a little bit. So not quite like any of the Phytosurgence bronzers. The ones I'm most interested in comparing are the Surratt ones. These are the newer Surratt Artistique bronzers. This is the shade Soleil Dew. I theorize that it's going to be kind of similar to this Golden Warmth, but it kind of looks more like Golden Daybreak. But let me swatch it for you. This is the one that I wasn't expecting to like as much from the Surratt bronzers, but it is the one that I have been preferring. I thought that they were going to be really similar. It looks swatched out with its depth really close to Golden Warmth. Whenever I put this on for the first time, I was like, it reminds me of that Surratt one. They both have a nice depth to them and are yellow. So if you happen to have this and you really like this, I would say this Golden Warmth is really close. It would be either one of two things. Either you don't need it, you don't need Golden Warmth because you already have this one from Surratt, or if you wanted to have multiple options because you really like this and you wanted to have it in a different format, I would say that those are pretty close to one another. I'm wondering if this one, Soleil Claire, will be close to Rosy Warmth. Let's see. I like Rosy Warmth. I don't really know that I like the Surratt one. It does kind of look like Rosy Warmth. It has a little more like red rather than being like pink as opposed to being like rosy. This one has, I feel like it has a little more of like maybe yellow in it than Rosy Warmth, but they're pretty close. They're pretty close. So if you have the Surratt ones and you're happy with them, I would say that you don't need any of the ones from Phytosurgence. But like I said, these are pretty close. The Surratt ones are really close to shades 3 and 4. What I will do is I'll swatch them closer together later on here so we can see them right next to each other because I know I have a lot going on. But right now I just want to kind of get things on my arm just so we can compare them. But I am running out of space. I probably will go onto this arm so we can get into it. I don't think this is going to match any of them. I think this would maybe match one of the deeper rosy shades, but I only have up to shade 4. This is the Chanel Soleil Tan Deep Healthy Glow Bronzer. I feel like this one lies between the two Surratt ones, so like kind of somewhere in between, maybe a little bit deeper. It's a little more right down the middle of yellow and rosy, so like maybe a little more neutral. It just looks like it falls right between those shades. I'll put this one aside to swatch with the Surratt ones too, up against those other two. This is the Victoria Beckham bronzer in light. There are 2 bronzer shades. This is technically the contour shade. The deeper shade is technically a contour shade, and then the lighter shade is technically the bronzer. I'm not sure that the lighter shade's gonna have anything close to it, but I'm wondering if the deeper shade might be close to Rosy Daybreak. Yeah, these are much fairer. So I really did love this bronzer in the wintertime, and I still really like it. But as far as like for the summertime, it's so faint. And you know, I tend to like a little bit more of a bronze, but yeah, it's not quite like anything. So if you have found that any of these would be too deep for you, then maybe the Victoria Beckham would be a way to go. But these are really adaptable on the skin. These are obviously like heavy swatches meant so you could see them in their fullest pigmentation. The Victoria Beckham bronzer is really easy to work with just overall. So I don't think it's a bad buy, but it's also just like, I don't think it's the most intense bronze. If you're like really into bronzer, then I would say that's really not the way to go. And then this is my last true bronzer. This is the Tom Ford in Terra. I would say this lands a little more neutral than any of the shades. It does kind of look pretty close to Golden Warmth. If it is close to anything, I would say it's closest to Golden Warmth, but to me it looks like somewhere in the middle as well. A thing that a lot of people with my skin tone like about Terra, if you've tried it, is that it feels like very neutral. It doesn't feel like you're making a choice of rosy versus golden. And I think based on these swatches versus something that is designed to be either golden or rosy, you can kind of see that. Now that's all of my actual bronzers. I have some contours and other items I would like to throw into the playing field. This one's not going to look like anything. This is the Danessa Myricks Contour Balm, and it is in the shade Light. I don't know. I think it has too much green in it. Like, it kind of looks like Golden Warmth. I have a lot against this product. Like, I don't really care for it. I can see how it might look the same, and maybe if you have this product, it could look something like Golden Warmth. In my opinion, it's not really giving. It's actually kind of more close to that Surratt one. But I think the thing about it is that I want it to be a contour, and it's that. It's not great. This is the Victoria Beckham Contour Stylist. It is in the shade Tavertine. And this definitely has like a bronzer feeling. So I'm wondering if it might look like any of the, I have so much bronzer on me right now. I wonder if it will look like any of those bronzers. I would say if anything, it's kind of close to Rosy Warmth from Phytosurgence. I'm gonna blend it out a little bit. Yeah, it's kind of close to Rosy Warmth. I'll set it aside to swatch next to it a little bit closer because I do think that these kind of look similar. This is the Milk Makeup Contour Toasted Sculpt Stick. Toasted, I think, is the shade name. That's definitely like a contour color. I feel like it's not really lining up with it. It has gray in it, which we're not seeing in any of the Phytosurgence ones. This is the e.l.f. Contour Wand, and it is in the shade Fair or Light. It kind of looks like Golden Daybreak a little bit, but it has more gray in it. And it's interesting, whenever I first swatched this contour shade from e.l.f., I remember everyone saying it looks really green. And I do think there is some green gray in it, but I don't think it reads as green as like maybe something like the Danessa Myricks does. It certainly is a contour shade and not a bronzer. I have this sample of Eros from Ritual Defeat. It's one of their Inner Glow pigments, and I wore this as a bronzer a couple of times and I really like it, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's close to one of these. And it was funny because after I used this for the first time as a bronzer, I said, ooh, I want to buy that full size. And then it was like, I kind of got it right around the time the Phytosurgence bronzers were getting announced. I was like, well, let me hold off on that because I'm going to buy those. I think it's another interesting one. It kind of looks like Rosy Warmth a little bit. It's more red though. It's not as pink, it's just more red. It kind of like the one from Chanel. It lives in the kind of in-between space between them. You can see how kind of like, it's a little bit darker, but you know, again, it all depends on how you're applying. I wouldn't say that it's like a true match for any of them. I also have Intuition, the Inner Glow pigment from Ritual Defeat. This is definitely going to be not like a bronzer. I thought it would be worth swatching next to things just to see. Yeah, it's definitely gray. It's not like any of the bronzers. Finally, this is the Oma contour in White Pearl. I think this is going to look more like a contour, but when I put it on my skin, I felt like when I blended it out, it kind of read a little bit bronzy. It's not quite like anything. It's looking more like my other contours. It's a little more warmth than the other contours. Like, it has that gray in it, but also it's like not as gray as Intuition, right? And it's not really as gray as the other two up here. I'm gonna wipe my arms off and then we'll come back and we will pull out the ones that were kind of close, and then that way we can see them right up next to each other. I do feel as though the lighter two bronzers from Phytosurgence, I don't quite have anything like, so I feel like in the mass market, bronzer ranges kind of start at Rosy Warmth and Golden Warmth, because I just feel like nothing I really swatched looked quite like these. That's just like something to note. If you always find that bronzer is a pain and you want to try something a little like more fair, I think that these are going to be maybe a good option for you. Let's swatch them next to each other. And then this is Soleil Claire from Surratt. So now that they're right up next to each other, they don't look quite as similar as they did when they were farther away. That makes sense. You know, they were pretty far away. And then I don't remember if the Victoria Beckham I thought was more like Rosy Warmth or if it was more like Golden Warmth. But let's just swatch it here to see. I would say that that is a little bit closer than even the Surratt one to Rosy Warmth. It has that pink to it. And it is supposed to be a contour shade, so maybe that's why it looks a little more pink gray. But not quite exact dupes, but like I think they're fairly close. But you probably wouldn't want to use this Stilo or Stylus as a bronzer because of just how thin it is, like product wise. Like, this would be paying a lot of money for a bronzer. As a contour, I don't mind it being priced and that, because like, you know, it's obviously meant to be like a pinpoint product. But yeah, I wouldn't buy this in lieu of this. If this is the shade that you're looking for, I would definitely say to go with the Phytosurgence. If you like to bronzer with something similar to this shade, then maybe Tabertine might be a good option for you for a bronzer. I'm gonna leave these swatches here and just work a little bit further down my arm because I think I said one of these shades was kind of like the in-between. This is Golden Warmth. And then this is the Soleil Dew shade from Surratt. They're fairly close. They're not exact dupes for each other. I would say that Soleil Dew is maybe a little bit deeper and has like a little more, I would say, like brown to it. I don't think it's more yellow or more golden than Golden Warmth, but I think on the cheek they're gonna read very similar. I kind of feel that same way about these two, but this one's less of a dupe than I think these two are. And then this again is the Chanel Soleil Deep Tan in the Healthy Glow bronzer. Yeah, it's not quite like them. And then I'm just gonna swatch it next to Rosy. Yeah, I do think it lives in like an in-between place because whenever it's closer to Golden Warmth, it doesn't look right. And then when it's like, it looks like, oh, maybe it looks closer to Rosy Warmth, but it's not really quite like either one of them. That ends my little swatch party portion of the video. I hope you found that helpful with the comparisons to my other bronzers in case you've encountered any of those. Let me send you back to the review. Welcome back. I hope you found that informative. I know that people really love to like get into like swatching, and that's not always my gig, but I know it's useful to you, so that's why I do it. I do it for you, not for me. Let's talk about the bronzers. Let's talk about the experience of using them overall first. These bronzers are unlike anything that I have tried before. They have a spectral light or spectral something, which is, I'm gonna call it a highlighting product, but I don't wanna mislead you. Some people do use it as a highlighter. A lot of people use it for a lot of things. And I did try that product in 2022, at the beginning of 2022, and I did not get on with it. It was not something that I really enjoyed using much at all. I do love the brand Phytosurgence. I think they're a really cool brand. I have one of their eyeshadows and I love it. Their Skin Spark blushes are my favorite cream blush formula. So I know that they are capable of like really good things. So whenever they announced their bronzers, I was so interested in them because the shade range was amazing. And not only that, there were different undertones for whatever you would like. So rosy and golden, and it goes up in depth from there. These are unlike any bronzer that I've used before, and they do kind of remind me of what I remember of the spectral, the thing that I didn't like, the highlighters that I didn't really care for. The reason I didn't like them is that I just felt like they didn't look like highlighters that I would like to wear. And while other people use them for other things, I didn't find them useful in the same way that many other people do. And if you're interested in that, I would seek out reviews that say both things so you can get a good idea of what they actually are like, because you just have to do a lot of research before you purchase that product and know what you're getting into before you get it, which I didn't do. And I just suggest that you should do that before you consider purchasing that product. I'm happy to report that you don't have to have that same fear with this. Now, it is interesting. The first time I got them, now the brand says not to finger swatch them, but I have obviously finger swatched them for you. But now that I know what these look like, I'm probably not going to finger swatch them unless I'm comparing them to another item. But now that they're like mine and I've done all the swatching that I've needed to do with them, I probably won't stick my fingers in them again. The first time I stuck my fingers into them, the first time I touched these, I hadn't put the product on my face yet, so a brush hadn't made contact with them. The first time I touched them, it was super balmy, and it was actually really easy to pick up on my finger. But as I've put brushes in them to use them, I find that it's actually really hard to pick up with your fingers. So if you are a finger painter and you were intending on buying this to use your fingers with, I would say, right out the bat, not a product for you. Also, if you are a sponge user, I would also say not a product for you. You have to apply this with a brush, I think, for the best outcome. And I also think that that is what the brand says. I'm just here to reaffirm that what the brand says is also been my experience with it. If your finger can't pick up the product, what does a brush do? I can't answer that question. I'm not a scientist. I was supposed to be an engineer. I don't know what is different about the brush picking up. I don't know. The bristles pick up just enough product that it disperses on your face just really beautifully. I have found that I have had no application issues with it just using a stippling brush. I've been using the Sonia G Sheer Buffer brush. Just for reference, this is what that brush looks like. So it's a stippling brush. This was designed for cream bronzer specifically, but I think any dense stippling brush will do, or any dense brush designed for creams I think will work just fine with this formula. It doesn't pick up my foundation, it applies beautifully over it, and it also has applied beautifully over powder. I've had no issues with the application process in that manner. Layering things on top and underneath it doesn't seem to matter. It's going to apply beautifully anyway. And that's just like the real beauty of it. But I think what the most beautiful thing that the brand got right, like I think the formula is spot on. It's an interesting formula, which is also really cool. It doesn't have the texture that anything else I own has, which is really cool. And also, it tends to match the finish of whatever you have on your face already. So I would say it has at its base a skin finish, so it's not dewy and it's also not super matte. It just looks like it belongs on your skin. So if you do a really dewy base and then you apply it on top of it, it's gonna match that dew. And if you do a really matte base, I think it's also gonna match the matteness of whatever you're doing. So I find it's really adaptable in that way. I've put liquid highlighter underneath it and on top of it, same with liquid blush, powder blush, it just like doesn't matter. It almost has a powder finish. I would say it's closer to a powder finish. It behaves almost like a powder product, except for the way it picks up on a brush. But when you're putting it on the skin, it blends more like a powder than it does like a cream. It's an interesting formula to interact with because you'll probably have even saw the textures that I have in different cream bronzers in my overhead footage, and you could see that nothing was quite like these. They're not a balm. I wouldn't say they're super creamy because I would say that their cream blushes are like super creamy, and they're not the same. It's not the same formula as the cream blushes. So I think it's just really interesting to interact with. But as I said before, I think that the shades are the most impressive part. I mean, the formula is great. I have no complaints about the formula. It's a great formula. Not fussy. Does whatever I need it to. But let's talk shade by shade in my experience with them, because my experience with each shade was different. I bought all 4 of the shades I did because I wasn't sure which ones I was going to like. In recent past, I was sent 2 bronzers from Swatch. Swatch kind of did the same thing that Phytosurgence did here, where they released a more yellow leaning bronzer and a more rosy bronzer. And I have a lot of fair-skinned friends who really tend to like bronzers that are a little bit rosy. I'm thinking of like the Gucci bronzer, and I'm also thinking of the Jones Road bronzer in that like light pink shade. And a lot of people I know get on with that have like a similar skin tone to me. So when Surratt sent me those bronzers, I was really excited because I don't have a bronzer that is rosy. I have like red bronzers, but not like rosy. And when I put it on my face, I like didn't quite like the way that it looked, but I did really like the yellow leaning one. When Phytosurgence released these, I was like, I don't know what depth I'm going to like, and I also don't know what which shades I'm going to like. So I bought the first 4 just to cover my bases. The reason I got the Warmth shades as well as the Daybreak shades is because I recently tried the skin enhancer from Makeup by Mario, and I felt like it didn't show up on my skin. So I was a little bit concerned that the latest shades were not going to show up the way I want them to, and I was worried that with the undertones, like which ones I might like. So I was allowing myself to explore all of them. I have application footage of all of these. I will be showing them while I talk to you. Now, the first shade up is Golden Daybreak. This is the lightest golden shade. It is the shade number 1. I don't like this shade. I think it just has to do with the way that my skin leans. I have like a neutral undertone. I lean a little bit pink, but I wouldn't call my skin like absolutely cool tone, but there is like some pink in it. For whatever reason, I thought that this might be my favorite one because I've been enjoying that like yellow leaning bronzer from Surratt, but I actually didn't like this at all. I felt like it made my skin too yellow, and because it was light, I just think I got yellow and not quite the depth from a bronzer that I wanted, and it just didn't look really natural on my skin or organic to my skin. This might be better for someone who has olive undertones or just has more yellow leaning skin than I do. I know that Kackie likes it, and we are skin twins, but I do think Kackie leans a little more warm than I do, and I lean a little more pink. Like there's still like neutral in the middle that both of us aren't meeting. We both like a neutral foundation. For this bronzer, I don't really love the Golden Daybreak shade, so I'm avoiding this. If you have pink leaning skin, or if you have like neutral pink leaning skin like I do, I would pass on this one, especially if you don't really love super warm bronzers or super warm tones on your skin at all. I think that this one might be smart for you to avoid. Shade number 2 is Rosy Daybreak, and this is absolutely my favorite one. This is my favorite of the bronzers that I have tried. It just looks so natural on my skin. It just looks like that's what happens when I get sun. So I don't even think it looks like bronzer on me. It looks like something that my skin just does inherently, and I think they just really nailed this. Like I like this, like I've never experienced a bronzer like this, and I wasn't expecting to like the rosy shade at all, and this was really just a home run for me. The golden one went too yellow. This one is just right with me with the little bit of pink in it. I just think it just looks really good and at home on my skin, and I can really appreciate that. I don't think I've ever used a bronzer that looked like this on me. Everything looks just like bronzer, and this just feels really native to my skin. My friend Andromeda, we've talked a lot about contour and bronzer. We've had back and forth about this. Anytime like there's a contour or bronzer release, we talk about whether or not it's cool enough to be a contour for our skin tones, or if it's just bronzer. They took a chance and they purchased this, and they said it's really good. It really works out for them. It doesn't feel too bronzery, but it feels like bronzer. Like it's like what bronzer should be for the skin on our skin tone. This does it. And I think that's the experience with other people in different depths, but this one's my version of that. So if you have found that we are skin twins and you are in the market for a new bronzer and you lean a little bit pink and you like a little bit of a rosier look no further. Rosy Daybreak is where it's at. Next up is shade 3. This is Golden Warmth. And interestingly enough, this one's my second favorite. Whereas Golden Daybreak is too yellow and Rosy Daybreak is like the most natural looking. I actually look like that whenever sun touches my skin. Golden Warm looks like bronzer on me, and I like that. I like bronzer. I really love bronzer. And this is a beautiful actual bronzer shade, like cosmetic bronzer shade. Not that my skin is bronze, but like it looks like I'm wearing bronzer. And you know, sometimes I like that. And I think that's okay. You know, things don't always have to look natural on us. And I really like it. It feels like what I wish my skin looked like in the summertime, just like tan, beautiful, warm, golden in the sun. And I love it. It's not like Rosy Daybreak in the way where it just like looks organic to my skin. It's like, you know, it looks a little try hard, but not too try hard. It doesn't look bad, but just looks like more like makeup, where I think if I applied Rosy Daybreak with no makeup on, people would not clock that I had bronzer on. You know, like that's what that looks like. This is like clockable bronzer. And I think that's really great that the shades are really adaptable. I found that if I apply less of this, it looks really good, and I can also apply more for a more dramatic bronzer effect. Find that if you are going deeper, it's gonna just look more like bronzer on you than it's going to look like skin native. So if you like that look, I would say go maybe a shade deeper than you think you're going to want, because these are designed, I think, to look really natural on the skin. So that's why I had to get that really bronzery look from a deeper shade as opposed to being the one designed for my skin tone. Finally, we have the shade 4, Rosy Warmth. In the footage that you are seeing now, I am applying it over top of powder. It's actually the look that it's, you know, I was putting this face of makeup on, so this is where this footage came from. I've recorded these clips of application over the course of the past couple of weeks, so it's, you know, it's been different days. This all didn't happen today, but this I applied today, like the footage you're seeing today. I don't like this one as much as I like Rosy Daybreak, and I don't like it as much as I like Golden Warmth. And I don't really know what it is about it that I just don't like as much. It's not as skin native as Rosy Daybreak. Like, it doesn't look as natural on my skin, but it also doesn't look crazy on my skin. It's just like, it's not the look I want for bronzer. Golden Warmth I really like because it looks like bronzer and it feels like bronzer, and it just like gives me the effect of bronzer, but just in this formula. I don't know that I feel the same way about this. Like, I have it on today. I don't think it looks bad. I don't think it looks bad. I just don't know that it doesn't spark the same joy that shades 2 and 3 do. It doesn't hit the same, but I think it's really beautiful. And I think if you have, you know, like light medium skin and it's cool leaning, like rosy leaning, this will probably do what Rosy Daybreak does for me for you, and I think that's really worthwhile. When all is said and done, I think what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to declutter shades 1 and 4. I know I have friends who are interested in these, so I'm going to pass them on to them and they can enjoy the hell out of them like the way I'm enjoying shades 2 and 3. I'm excited to keep using these. I'm not moving them into my permanent collection quite yet. I still want to play with them even more, but I do feel confident about the way I feel about them. It's now coming down to, am I gonna just add these to my bronzer collection, or am I gonna make a cut in my bronzer collection? That's what I haven't decided yet. So that's why they're staying in my testing drawer. I think these are a beautiful bronzer, and I think that Phytosurgence really hit it out of the park with the tones, with the finish, with the application. Like, everything about it is just a fabulous bronzer. I can't recommend it enough. If you're on the market for a bronzer, specifically a cream, or if you just want to try a very interesting cream bronzer formula, I'd say look no further than the Phytosurgence one. Even if you typically like powders but you're interested in trying creams, I think that this would be a good place to start for a cream bronzer. But I just think it's fabulous. While I don't love the highlight from Phytosurgence, everything else from Phytosurgence I've tried, I've absolutely loved. I love their Verdant Force Field, which is their moisturizer. I love the eyeshadows, and I also now love the bronzers and their cream blushes. You know, it's just like, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And if they ever release a really, really blinding highlight, I'm first in line. That wraps up today's video. If you happen to enjoy today's video, I would love to have you subscribe if you're not subscribed already. Share this with someone who might find this information useful, if you think they would find it useful. Anyone who might be interested in these and haven't pulled the trigger and are still looking for reviews, tell them Tom sent you. And I'm on patreon.com if you'd like to support me there to help support future reviews on my channel. Or not. You don't have to. It's up to you. But on my Patreon, I do additional content for everyone at every level. And I also release the podcast I do with Kackie on my Patreon. You can also join Kackie's Patreon if you would prefer joining hers. It was released on both of our Patreons separately. You can find it in either place. It doesn't really matter. And yeah, there's merch down below if you're interested in that. You can find me on other social media, meaning Instagram. I don't have much social media. I'm on TikTok too. So, I mean, you can find me there, but I don't really... If you follow me on YouTube, you get the short form and the long form, so, you know, you can follow me on Instagram if you want to watch my stories, which is where I get silly, goofy, funny. Anyway, that wraps it up for me. Remember to follow your haute, and you'll find me. I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye.